So let's look a little bit more in depth about what's going on during the division phase of the cell cycle, during mitosis, when the body cells are being duplicated. So to start with, we have the first body cell that we have is 2N, which means it's twice the number of chromosomes compared to a sex cell. So there are 2 chromosomes for every trait. So this cell is going to grow during G1, and in S phase it's going to make a copy of the DNA. So here we just went from one set of DNA, which is 2N, to a copy of that. So we have another 2N. So now we have a copy of the DNA since it went through S phase. The cell goes through G2, grows a little bit more, and then it's going to go into mitosis. So let's say that we had a cell with 4 chromosomes. During S phase, those 4 chromosomes that we started with would each make a copy of that chromosome, and the 2 copies stick together, forming these X's. So this is how we can tell that the cell has gone through S phase. We no longer see the single chromosomes. We now have a copy attached to each one. Once again, the cell goes through G2 after S phase, and now it's going to start with the first division. When the cell divides during mitosis, each new cell will get a copy of the DNA. That's why the cell went through DNA replication to begin with. So it had to replicate the DNA so that when the cell divided, each new cell would have its own copy of the DNA. That way, the body cells that we create in the end are identical to the body cells at the beginning. But let's go through each step as to how this actually happens. So the first step of mitosis is called prophase. This is when the nucleus and the nuclear membrane breaks apart. So the chromosomes are freed. They're no longer in the nucleus. Then we have metaphase. Metaphase is when the chromosomes line up in the middle of the cell, also called the metaphase plate. After metaphase, the cell will go into anaphase. This is when the chromosomes, or the copies of the chromosomes, are pulled apart. So we originally had the X's, which meant we not only have one segment of DNA, but we have a copy attached to it. If you look down in anaphase, those 2 copies are pulled apart from each other, and they're dragged to opposite ends of the cell. And the last phase is telophase. Also, cytokinesis is occurring here. This is when a nucleus will reform around each set of chromosomes, and the middle of the cell will start to pinch in until the cell pinches in enough that it breaks off into 2 separate cells. And that's the end of mitosis and cytokinesis. So let's talk about some of the major events going on in mitosis and what it's doing. So mitosis is creating body cells, also known as somatic cells. It will create 2 body cells at the end of mitosis. In addition, the cell is going to be dividing once in order to create these 2 cells. So it only split once. And the body cells that are created are identical to each other and identical to the original cell. Because they're identical, this means that they're going to have the same number of chromosomes. So if we start with 4 chromosomes on the original cell, the cells at the end each have 4 chromosomes in it. If we start with 46 chromosomes at the beginning of mitosis, each cell at the end has 46 chromosomes. They're creating identical body cells. Now, this process of mitosis was the way that we created body cells. But if you remember, I said we also have sex cells. The process of creating a sex cell is a bit different, and it's called meiosis. So we're going to start with a body cell in order to create sex cells. The body cell has 2N, twice the number of chromosomes compared to the sex cell, or 2 chromosomes for every trait. This body cell is going to go through S phase, which means we're going to make a copy of the DNA. So that now we have 2 sets of 2N. The cell will split once in order to create cells that have only 1 set of DNA in it. So this is the first division. And then it's going to split again. So we have the second division. During meiosis, we're creating 4 sex cells, also referred to as gametes, and it's going to divide twice in order to create these 4 sex cells. In addition, because the sex cells only have half of the number of chromosomes in them, all of the sex cells are going to be different. They have different combinations of DNA. So these cells that are created have only N number of chromosomes, which is half the number compared to what they started with. So during meiosis, the chromosome number is cut in half. If we started with 46 chromosomes before meiosis, we only have 23 chromosomes in each cell after meiosis. If we started with 10 chromosomes in a cell before meiosis, we only have 5 chromosomes in the cell after meiosis. It's important that you're able to understand the differences between mitosis and meiosis, recognize which process is which, and how they are similar but how they're also different from each other.